Today we're going to talk about the 7th and 10th commandments. And the two are about the same thing. And actually what Father was talking about today in his sermon about basically materialism, property, these are the commandments that cover that. Last week we talked about God giving us life. God gave us life, and like any good father, he also gives us what is necessary to sustain life. We need a house, we need food, we need clothing, and therefore, God, knowing that, allows us to have those things. Father was talking about the blessed being poor in spirit, and we'll get to the Beatitudes in another class, but that's the idea behind the 7th and the 10th commandments is you're allowed to have personal property, but you aren't supposed to hold it as if it's the be-all and end-all of your existence, because it isn't. Your goal is, as Father said, to get to heaven. And I think I quoted this, I don't remember who said this, some monk, but he said, life is a bridge. You cross over it. You don't build a house there. The idea is to get to the other side, to get to heaven. Everything that happens to us in this world is the means to that end. And so the goods that we receive are not meant to just make us happy in this life. Our ultimate goal is happiness in heaven. So the things that we have in this life, we are allowed to own, we have a right to them. We have a right to property, we have a right to food and clothing and the things that we've earned with our sweat and our labor. But they are not the be-all and end-all of our existence. So the 7th commandment is, the purpose of it is to show that morally you are allowed to have those things, and you have a right to possess them, and you have a right to protect them. Because God commands us to love him, he also commands us to love our neighbor. But he doesn't command you to love your neighbor more than yourself. If the choice comes down to your life or your neighbor's life, your life is more important. If it comes down to your goods or your neighbor's goods, your goods are more important. He commands you to love your neighbor, but not more than yourself. The 7th commandment is thou shalt not steal. The 10th is thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods. Both of them are about goods, your neighbor's goods. The difference between the two is the 7th is talking about physically taking from your neighbor. The 10th is a mental sin, wanting what they have to the point that you would be willing to take it, but you're prevented from doing it. So the two are very similar. By the 7th commandment, which is against stealing, God forbids he forbids 3 different things. First, all unjust taking of our neighbor's goods. So first thing that comes to mind is robbery. Robbery is physically taking another's goods by force. And then there's theft. That's physically taking another's goods, but by stealth. Both of them are forbidden. It also forbids you to receive stolen goods. Because in that way you are cooperating in the sin of the other person. Remember, we went in another lesson, we went through ways that you can't participate in someone else's sin. Receiving stolen goods, you are participating in their sin. If they couldn't get rid of the goods, they might not take them. And if you find that you have received stolen goods, they are not yours to keep. Just by the fact that you may even have paid someone for this, and you find out that it's stolen, it still has to be returned to its owner. And no, you cannot ask them to reimburse you. Their rights to the goods did not cease when they were stolen. They still belong to that person. And sorry, you're out the money you paid for it. It has to be returned if you find out that they're stolen. Now, you may have received them in good faith. You know, this guy was giving you a great deal, and afterwards you find he's arrested, and you find out that all the things that he sold you were stolen. That was why it was such a great deal. You have to return it to the owner. So it forbids unjust taking. Now, there are times when it is justified to take something from your neighbor. Let's say, for example, you would know about this down here. Well, it does snow down here occasionally, every 10 years or so. I remember the first winter I was in Louisiana, it snowed, you got a whole quarter of an inch, and everything shut down. All the interstates, they don't realize that you can just throw sand on that and then drive on it, and you have so much sand down here, but yeah, you're not used to it. Like, in Syracuse, 30 inches of snow and falling overnight is not an unusual thing. So, but they're used to it, you're not. So let's say you were in a snowstorm and your car broke down. You got, slid off the side of the road into a snowdrift and you're stuck. You can't move, and it's freezing cold out there. And right there is a house, but there's nobody home. You can break into that house, and you can use his wood or his coal to make a fire in the fireplace, or turn on his furnace, and you can even eat his food if you're hungry. That is not unjust taking, because it's a necessity to save your life. You can do it. It's understood that if the owner were there, he probably would offer it to you. Now, when you leave, if you have the means to do so, you should leave some money behind to pay for what you took. But if you have no money, well then, in the future, try to get him something to reimburse him for what you took. But even if that's not possible, there's no obligation. That's not unjust taking. But while you're there, you also have an obligation to protect his property. You can't damage something and just use something. Or take something with you when you leave because you liked it. No. And the obligation to take care of property is not just in that case where you're with somebody, but anybody's property. You have an obligation to take care of. You're in the church. The church is this. Yes, you put money in the basket on Sunday, I hope, and the church belongs to the whole parish, but that doesn't give you a right to damage things. And by the way, if you damage church property, that would be another sin called sacrilege, which is a mortal sin, always a mortal sin.
Unless it's on accident, right?
Pardon me?
Unless it's on accident, right?
If it's by accident, it's not intentional. If you get up and you're clumsy and you knock over the holy water fountain, you smash it, that's certainly not intentional. So yes, it's not sacrilege. But if you come in here and you write your name on the wall, I know a girl who did that. She was kicked out of school for it because it was sacrilege. That's in the next point, but the second point is called unjust damaging of others' property. And teenagers are this is the point that teenagers have a big problem with. I know this because I had boarding girls live with me, and I know that every year when they went home for the summer, I had to go repaint parts of the house where they'd written their names all over something. We went We went to donate the mattresses to the boys' boarding school, and underneath, we had bunk beds, and under the upper mattress, everybody had written their names all over the mattress. Could give that to the boarding house, the boarding boys. One of the drawers in one of the desks was filled with people's names, you know, and the year that they went to school there or whatever. Why do you feel you need to leave behind an acknowledgement that you existed or that you were in that particular place? You know, you go into parks, use the bathroom in any park or any public restroom, you'll find all written all over the walls. Why? That's unjust damaging of property. It's costly. You may think it's no big deal, but it is. Do you enjoy using a public restroom with the walls all written up like that? Graffiti, you know, you drive down the highway, you see it all over the place. That's unjust damaging. It's almost always done by teenagers. Sorry, but that's life. So get over it. Unjust damaging is willfully damaging property knowing that the owner would object. Now, there's cases when the owner wouldn't object. Remember the case of the snowstorm. In order to get into that person's house, you probably had to break a window or a lock on the door. Would the owner have objected? No. Can he object now? Not really, because it saved your life. He would be a very sad, mean person if he objected to you breaking the lock on his door so you could save your life or the life of your family that's caught out in the snow. That would be wrong, and so it's not the same. And why, as I say, when you're using the property of someone, you should use as much care as you can, knowing that it isn't yours. You borrow something from someone. You should take care of it. More care than you would take of your own, because it doesn't belong to you. It should be returned. And yes, in the course of using it, if it gets broken in some way, it would be understandable that you should fix it. Just not return it and say, hey, I ran over a nail in a flat, got the tire on the tractor got flat, here. You were using it, you should fix it and return it to him in the same way that you received it. Now, if it can't be fixed, then of course, then you want to reimburse him or give him something to help him to replace it. No, you shouldn't have to buy a new one because it was used. And I know people, even traditional Catholics, who borrow things and keep them for years and without returning them. I know somebody up in Syracuse who borrowed a pressure washer and still hasn't returned it. That's like 5 years ago. And I keep telling the guy who lent it, tell him to give it back to you. You need it. Why should you go out and buy a new one? Because he's forgotten it, or he's just enjoying it so well. Tell him to give it back. So, and when library books, sometimes you lose them, in which case the library usually will charge you for them if you don't return them. But even if you do return the book, you should return it in decent condition. You should take care of things that you borrow. You borrow something and you get a stain on it, you should take it to the dry cleaner and try and get the stain out before you return. Not just give it back and say, hey, look, I'm sorry. And yet, people do that all the time. I mean, the boarding girls would borrow constantly from each other, and they had no problem with breaking things in the house or breaking things that belonged to other people and just saying, oh, I'm sorry. And then they wonder why we had to put in a breakage fee. And then the third thing is all forms of cheating in buying and selling. Not just stealing, but cheating is also forbidden by this commandment. And you have to remember, this includes employers and employees. Well, buyers and sellers, first of all, let's look at them. A buyer and a seller, there's a contract that goes on between those two people. The buyer is saying, I will supply this, whatever, in this quality, this quantity, in this time period. And the buyer says, and I will pay you this much money for it. It's a contract. So even if it's not written down on paper, it's a contract. When you go into a store or you go online and you buy something, then there's a description of the item. If this is what you should be getting. If you do not get that, if the buyer gives you the wrong color or if he gives you poorer quality than what he described, what you understood you were getting, then he's cheating. He's stealing. And if you promise to pay him a certain amount of money for it and you don't pay, you are stealing. You are cheating. Yes?
Even if it's like poor quality.
If it's poor quality, then you need to go back to him and say, hey, this is what you're giving me. It's not worth this amount of money. Either you take it back or, let's renegotiate the price. But you just don't say, it's only worth $2 and that's all I'm going to pay. Return it to him. Just return him the item and then renegotiate it. But there are people who, for example, will go to a doctor or a dentist and they owe money to them and they don't pay the bill until the next time they need to go to a doctor or a dentist. And then they'll pay the bill because now they need to see him again, or they'll go to a different one. And their attitude is, well, he's rich, he can afford it. There are a lot of people who don't pay their bills. And your bill, if you promise to pay your bill within 30 days, you need to pay it within 30 days. If you can't, then you need to go back to the person and explain the situation. Because of COVID, I'm out of a job now and I can't pay this, but as soon as I can, I will. All right, so what about employers, employees? People who work, they're sellers. They're selling their work to an employer for a certain amount of money. They need to supply what the employer is paying them for. Maybe the employer is paying you for 8 hours of work, 5 days a week. You should be giving him 8 hours of work, not 7 hours of work and 1 hour of goofing off. If you are, you're cheating. Your employer also on his side, needs to make sure you have everything you need to do the work, and he has to pay you a fair wage. He has to be satisfied with not making, he shouldn't be making huge amounts of profit on your labor by paying you a pittance. That's why they ended up having labor unions. Labor unions are probably no longer necessary, but if you probably did away with them, the employers would go back to the way they worked before, which was having people work for long hours for very little money in very poor conditions, especially in very dangerous jobs like mining, construction, and things like that. And that's why there are unions in those kinds of jobs. And your employer has the obligation to pay you on time. If he's supposed to pay you every 2 weeks, you should be receiving the right amount of money for the work you did every 2 weeks. Or he would be stealing from you. You also, as an employee, have an obligation to take care of the equipment that you use. You can't just walk out of the shop and say, oh, I need a wrench at home, so I'll take this one. That's stealing. Johnny Cash made a song about, what was the Cadillac that they made out of parts. You know, he worked for the car dealer, in Detroit for the car thing, the song, and every day he would take home parts and put it together to make, a car. There is truth to that story. I know people who work for Ford in Kentucky, and they, we're always talking about the guys taking home equipment, parts that they needed for their vehicles, tools, equipment, whatever. That's wrong. That's stealing. Is it a mortal or a venial sin?
Mortal.
It depends entirely, first of all, on the value of the property that's taken, and the injury that's done. For example, if you took $100 from maybe your boss. Let's say 100, because the church it has guidelines for it. Let's say you took $50 from your boss without him knowing about it. That would be a venial sin, because we're assuming your boss, has a lot more money than that. So the church more or less says $100 or more makes it mortal if the person can, has that kind of money. But if you took, let's say you stole $5 from a homeless person, that could be mortal, because they don't have the money. So, and you're doing a grave injury to them. You're not doing a grave injury to your boss by stealing $50, but you are doing a grave injury to the homeless person. So it depends upon the situation and the case and the amount of damage that you do. If you destroy property that's worth more than $100, yes, you've committed a mortal sin. Does that mean then that you can steal money from a rich man in a corporation, and it won't be a mortal sin because they're rich and you're not doing a lot of damage to them? The answer is no. It doesn't matter that they're rich or that the corporation is wealthy. As I say, the church says more than $100, it becomes mortal. Now that money changes as, back when I was a kid, when things, like I say, you could go to the movies for 25 cents and gas was a quarter, and, you could get a pound of meat for a nickel, and candy was a penny. Stealing $5 back then was a lot of money. Now stealing $5 isn't a lot of money. So changes, and the church will change the limits too, depending on as time goes by. We go back to living in that sort of situation. Stealing $50 may be a mortal sin then, or $25. But the church will give a guideline on that. But it's still a sin, and it can be a mortal sin, even though the corporation or the person is very rich. What about stealing small amounts? Let's say you work for a company and you handle their money like a store, and you're just stealing small amounts of money. $5 a week you're stealing. Over a period of time, does that become a mortal sin?
I think so.
Again, it depends upon your intention. If you intended up front to steal, I want to buy a motorcycle, and I need $1,000. So if I just take $10 a week over a period of time, by the end of 3 months, I should have enough money to buy the motorcycle. If that was your intention, to steal that amount of money, yes, it's a mortal sin. If you were just doing it at first, as you started out just doing $10, then no. But after a few weeks, you should probably realize this is adding up to quite a bit, considerable amount of money, and you should realize that, and if you should stop. Otherwise, you're passing the line and going into, again, it always comes down to your intention. Mortal sin is based on your intention. And your intention was to steal a lot of money, where the other person's intention was just to steal a little bit, but they're slowly building it up to a lot of money. And they need to understand that. So whenever you steal anything or you damage anything and you cheat anybody, you need, in order to go to confession and have the priest give you absolution for it, you need to make restitution. And that's one of the first things the priest is going to tell you, or that he's going to ask you. Did you make restitution? Or do you intend to make restitution? Or you have to make restitution, depending upon what the situation is. Now, what is restitution? Restitution means giving it back, replacing it, taking care of it. There's one who has stolen anything has to restore to the owner the thing that he stole, if it's still in his possession. And if it's not, he has to restore its value. The value at the time that you stole it. If it was used, you don't have to restore full value, but you have to restore its value. If you still have it, you have to give it back. It means if you can't make restitution, yes?
What if you stole something candy or maybe, or you stole something and used it?
If you stole something, you used it, therefore you don't have it to return, you have to replace it. You have to give back its value, or something equal to it. If you lack the means of making restitution, you don't have any money. You can't replace it. You still have to resolve to do so at the first opportunity. And you have to resolve to do so. You have to intend to do so. If the owner of what that you need to restore this to is dead, then you have to give it to his heirs. I remember a situation in the convent one time. We owed money to, it was a construction guy. He helped build our, he had done work on building our house, the convent. He and his wife died in a car accident, leaving 3 children. The oldest boy was like in his 20s, and he took care of his siblings. Most of the people that owed his father and mother money, they're dead. I don't have to pay it. You can't prove anything. I know my superior pulled the boy in and told him, this is how much we owed your father. We'll pay you, so much a week, the same way we were going to pay your father until it's paid. And that's what she found out, that the other people weren't paying. They owed, but they weren't paying. Even though the person is dead, that does not cancel the debt. You owe it to the heirs. If you receive stolen goods in good faith, that means you bought it without knowing they were stolen, and then you find out, you have to restore them to the owner. And if you've used them up, then you don't have to. Let's say you bought food and you've eaten it, you can't restore it. You don't have to pay them for it either. It was, if the owner of the stolen goods or his heirs is unknown, or you can't find the property, or you can't find them, then you have to give the property or the goods or the value of it to charity, to God, either to a church, some charitable organization. You can't just say, well, he's dead, I don't know who it is, I'm done. No, you still have to do something about it. You stole it, you have to make restitution. You can't restore it to the person or his heirs, you have to give it to God in some other way. Make a donation to the church from it. Maybe that's why the mafia is so generous to the church. I'm not sure. And one who willingly damages another property has to make good the loss. If you knowingly and willfully damage their property. If it's accidental, not necessarily. If you can, it's good to do, but if you can't, you are not under an obligation to do so. So yes, if you did it, and I told you I'm a grammar teacher, so I'll tell you this. The word is not on accident. The proper preposition is by accident. I know you do things on purpose, but it is by accident. Just a little grammar tip there for you. I know everybody says on accident, and it just really bothers me when I hear them say it. But the girls would say it all the time in the boarding house. I said, all right, so where are you getting your grammar from? Not in our school. All right, so what about lost articles? You find something that somebody lost. You have an obligation to try and discover the owner. If you can't, then you can keep it. You can keep it. If you find it in a building, it's like the church or a school or a store, you should give it to someone in authority in that building, because it's understood that the person who lost it will go back to where they think they lost it and look for it there. Yes? What if it's lost? What if it's lost what?
Money?
Oh, money? You can hold on to the money, but you still need to notify someone, and you don't have to say that you found money. For example, let's say you found a wallet. You can hold on to the wallet. You have to notify somebody that try and find if the person's name is in the wallet. Notify them. If you find it, and let's say in a store, you can go to the manager of the store and say, I found a wallet. There's no name in it, but if somebody comes looking for a wallet, here's my name and number, have them call me. And when they call you, you need to ask them questions so that you know that they're the owner of the wallet. You know, what does it look like? Is there anything special on it? What cards are in it? You know, you're a member of a certain organization according to the card in it. What is the name of the organization? If they can identify it, then it's theirs. If it's money and it's just plain out and out money, you can keep it, because there's no way somebody can possibly claim it that you would know that it's actually theirs, because unless they came up to you and said, I lost a bag and it had $237.49 in it, then yeah. You knew the exact amount.
I got to return that $50,000 the other day I found on the street.
You know the exact amount, yeah, I guess it probably is theirs. In which case, yeah, you have to return it to them. So, if you find, for example, what about like lost pets? You need to notify the police or somebody so that the owner can come and find it. Or if it's really valuable property, you need to notify the police. You can still hold on to it or let them hold on it. The police will hold on to it for a certain amount of time. If nobody claims it, then they're supposed to return it to you. They're supposed to. I don't know if that really works or not. But again, I don't think they would have a problem with you holding on to it and just letting, say, if somebody comes looking for this, you know, I've got it.
Here's a good question, all right? This has never happened to me, but, okay, somebody came and stole stuff from me. I know they did it. I know it's in their house. Is it then a sin to go break into their house and steal it back?
Yes,
I thought it
you
would
call
be,
the
but-
police, you call the police and let them handle it,
Yeah.
yeah. Yes,
Oh, that was subject to stealing, say like you bought a car, $20,000, right? And then later you found out that it was stolen, right?
yeah.
Would you be obligated, like you don't know who the car originally belonged to, would you be obligated to give the car to charity?
Well, first of all, with cars, there's
always a chain of custody.
a way of tracing cars. Cars all have VIN numbers, so,
I was using it as an example, like.
Yeah,
like
right.
a favor like that, like a lot of money, you still have to give it back, and it costs you like a lot, would you just be out of that money?
if you can't find, if you don't know who the owner is, and I would take that up with the priest. I don't think you're obligated to give it to charity because you didn't steal it. It's when you steal something that you have to restore it, and if you can't restore it, then you have to give the money to charity. But if you can't return it, to the owner and you found out it was stolen by somebody else, I think you're allowed to hold on to it in that case. It comes to this idea, where did I? If you receive stolen goods, you must restore them to the owner if in their possession. If they were consumed, then you do nothing. Well, in this case, it's not consumed, but you can't restore it, so again, you do nothing. Does that make sense? All right. The 10th commandment. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods. Covet means to desire what another has to the point of wishing to get it wrongfully. In other words, you would be willing to steal it. Or you begrudge them the ownership of it. This involves more than just wanting something. This almost involves a hatred of the person. Because there's nothing wrong with, you win a car in a raffle, and I really want that car, but I'm not willing to go and steal it from you. I'm not wishing you, that you would drive down the street, crack up, and have an accident with it. That would be wrong. The fact that you have the car and I wish that I had it, that's normal. The 10th commandment is evil-mindedness. The envy that you want it to the point of wishing ill to the person or willing to steal it. The 10th commandment is always mental. Both the 9th and the 10th commandments. The 9th commandment is the mental version of the 6th commandment. And the 10th commandment is the mental version of the 7th commandment. Both of them involve the mind, sinning in the mind. And that can spill over into actual deed. You have it, I want it. If I get a chance, I'm going to take it. I've committed the sin mentally in my mind. If I do get the chance and I do take it, then I've committed the 7th commandment. I've broken both the 10th and the 7th. The 10th often leads to the 7th. The fact that we steal things, we usually wanted it in the first place. The point of the commandment is that we need to be content with what we have. God gives us everything that we need, but somehow we always feel that we need something else. We always want more. Both the 7th and the 10th commandments tell us that we should avoid what we should avoid in our relationship with our neighbor, that they have the right to their personal property. But they're both very negative commandments. You're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to steal. You're not allowed to cheat. You're not allowed to rob. You're not allowed to take. You're not allowed to damage. They're very negative commandments. So what is the positive? What should you be doing for your neighbor?
Giving.
Exactly. They're called the 7 corporal works of mercy. This is how you should be acting toward your neighbor.
Can you list those for me?
Yes, I will. How do we know about these? Well, first of all, our Lord was very specific. He said, "And when the Son of Man shall come in his majesty and all the angels with him, then shall he sit upon the seat of his majesty, and all the nations will be gathered together before him, and he will separate them into 2 groups, the sheep and the goats. The sheep he will put on his right hand and the goats on his left. And then the king will say to them that are on his right hand, the sheep, the good ones, 'Come, you blessed of my Father, possess you the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me to drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in, naked, and you covered me, sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me.' For shall the just answer him, saying, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and take you in, or naked and covered you? When were you sick or in prison and we came to see you?' And the king answered, saying, 'Amen, I say to you, as long as you did it to one of these, my least brethren, you did it to me.' And then turning to those on the left, he says, 'Depart from me, you cursed, into everlasting fire, which was prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me not to eat. And I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you took me not in. Naked, and you covered me not. Sick and in prison, and you didn't visit me.' Then shall they say, answering him, say, 'Lord, when was we were thirsty or hungry, a stranger or naked, and we didn't minister to you?' And he said, 'Amen, I say to you, as long as you did it to one of these, the least, you did not do it to me. And these shall go into everlasting punishment, and the just into everlasting life.'" Our Lord was very specific. You also have here the whole idea of the mystical body of Christ. What you do to your neighbor, you do to me. We are all connected. We are connected mystically in Christ. You should look upon your neighbor as Christ, because he is Christ, especially if he's baptized. He has the life of God in him. So what are the 7 corporal works of mercy? To feed the hungry, to give drink to the thirsty, to clothe the naked, to harbor the stranger, to visit the sick, to visit the imprisoned, and the one that isn't mentioned in that parable, to bury the dead. You have a whole book of Tobias written about burying the dead and the value of it and how God looks upon it. So burying the dead also is one of the corporal works of mercy. Why does God command us to love our neighbor? First of all, because God made him in his own image and likeness, and therefore we should see Christ in him. Second, because like you, Christ redeemed him. Yes?
So like the fact that grandmother did, do you mean like literally like help shoveling in the soil, or just being like attended to?
Oh, we'll get to that. I'm going to go through to them individually in a minute. And thirdly, because on the cross, Christ made us brothers with him, and God is the Father of us all. So we are related. Just as you love your brothers or your sisters or your mother or your father, you should love your neighbor in the same way. He is your brother. She is your sister. in Christ, but she also is Christ. He also is Christ. If you keep that idea in your mind when dealing with your neighbor, it will make loving him and continuing to love him regardless of what he does to you a lot easier. And yes, sometimes it's very hard to deal with your neighbor and to look at him and say, with any kind of, real meaning, that you love him. Because he's annoying, he's a pest, he's mean, he can be even evil, but you still have to love him.
Sister,
Yes,
when you say you still have to love them, does that mean pray for them?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
You don't have to be around them.
No, you don't have to invite him into your home and, and it's, all right. God expects you to love your neighbor, and he expects you to perform the 7 corporal works of mercy, but he doesn't expect you to treat all your neighbors equally. Let me answer your question. He doesn't expect you to treat them all equally. Yes, he does expect you to pray for him and to help him if you can when he needs it. But God also understands that you have certain duties and obligations, and those come first. There's a hierarchy to helping your neighbor. You do it in a particular order. God expects you to give your love and your duty first to your parents, your children, your relatives, your superiors, and those who depend upon you, those for whom you are responsible. You should be, if you're a teenager, you should be giving your love and your help and performing the corporal works of mercy to those in your family first. Then the next one in line would be your pastors or religious superiors, the members of your parish or your school. There's a hierarchy. First your family, then your parish, your spiritual obligations. Those to whom you are spiritually connected have a right to expect more from you. And then the next level would be your community and your country. So there's a hierarchy. Charity requires us to fulfill our duty first. Charity is love, but it requires that you have to fulfill your duty. Remember, God expects you to love your neighbor, but not more than yourself, not more than your children, not more than your parents, not more than your pastor. Go down the line. That's the order. You love them, then them, then them. There's an order to it. So once you've fulfilled your duty to those to whom you have an obligation to help, then you look about for others that you can help. And the same works with employers and employees. An employer must always make sure that his employees are fairly taken care of before he donates money to other charities. He can't be paying his employees a pittance. He can't know that they're going home hungry. Scrooge with Cratchit, he should have been taking care of Cratchit before he donated. Of course, Scrooge wasn't donating money to any charity, but if that were the case, businesses need, before they donate a wing to a hospital, make sure that all of their employees are being paid a fair wage. That they're not cheating people by overcharging huge amounts of money. And that's why they can donate, to the hospital. It has to be done fairly. So how do you put the corporal works of mercy into practice? What can you do? Once you've taken care of all those obligations, you have chores to do at home. Once you've done those chores, is there anything you can do for somebody else? And you look around. First of all, look around your house. What can you do for other members of your family? I'm sure sisters can find other ways to help their brothers and sisters and their mother and their father. But assuming that you've done all of that, How do you feed the hungry and give drink to the thirsty? Most of the time, and the best way this is done is, and probably not by you, is done by employers, making sure that they have jobs, that hiring people. It's better to hire someone that they have a regular paycheck than just giving a donation to them, say, giving $5. This person's out of work, and here's $5. But how about if you come every Saturday and mow my grass? Maybe you don't really need for him to come and mow your grass. You usually do that yourself. But if you can pay, it's better to give him a regular job. What's that expression? It's better to teach someone to fish than to just give them the fish. That feeds them once and the rest. There's truth to that. So if you're an employer, even if you have to make jobs that don't exist, if you have the money to do it, you've got extra profits in the bank, rather than donating the wing on the hospital, which is a good thing in itself, make up some jobs, hire extra people, open another branch to your business, whatever. You can also donate canned goods to soup kitchens or volunteer for work at such places. There used to be one here in Baton Rouge. I don't know if it still exists. It was run by Brothers. I know that Community Brothers no longer exists, but I don't know if the soup kitchens still exist. But they still exist around. There's still places. And even if there aren't, Goodwill in a lot of places like that, food pantries, that donate money, donate food to the poor or to the elderly, have. By the way, it just occurred to me, Meals on Wheels is always looking for volunteers. That's feeding the hungry. Putting together the meals and then taking them to the place. And it also involves visiting the sick, because a lot of those elderly people, the only contact some of them have with the outside is the person who brings the meal, who sits and talks to them for a few minutes. Or maybe, throw some of the dirty clothes in the washer for them while they're there, and doesn't hurry away to the next job. I know people who do that. It spends a little bit of time. You don't see them every single day, so whenever you do visit them, spend some. How are you doing? Talk to them. Sometimes they have nobody else. Clothing the naked. This is done. Easy way to do this: donate clothes to the when you're no longer using clothing and it's still usable, you donate it. St. Vincent de Paul, Goodwill, the veterans. There's all groups all over the place that take donations of clothing and make good use of it. Harboring the stranger. Catholic orphanages do this, homes for the elderly, sanitariums for the sick, and others. They continually need people. This country no longer has orphanages, now that we have the foster system, which is not the greatest system in the world. The only orphanages still left in this country are a place where they have children that are unadoptable. They have such physical or mental problems that they can't be adopted. But in other countries, they still exist. The group the father was talking about this morning, the sisters, they have an orphanage in India. I worked for 10 years for an orphanage in Mexico. But this country doesn't have them. But there's still plenty of old age homes, which, and they always need volunteers. You could be a candy striper in a hospital going around, bringing magazines and books to the people in the rooms, or visiting the elderly in the hospital, in the nursing homes. If sometimes there are teenagers out there in the world that have been put out of their own homes for one reason or another. And if you can take them, you know this girl or this boy, and if it's possible for you to take them in, then that would be harboring sheltering the stranger. Visiting sick, prisoners, and burying the dead. All right, visiting the sick is not that difficult. There's plenty of opportunities for that. As I say, nursing homes, members in the parish who are sick that aren't contagious, the elderly in nursing homes, it's always good to go to the nursing home and say the rosaries with some of the people there. Contact the activities director at the nursing home. Syracuse, we had a number of different groups of ladies who would go around. When groups of 2 or 3, they would assign themselves to different nursing homes, and they would go there on a weekly basis and say the rosary with the clients, as they call them, the people in the nursing home. The Catholics who wanted to, they would visit them in their rooms, or they would say it together as a group on each floor, or whatever, however the nursing home decided it was to be done. But they also made friends with some of the other Catholics in the nursing home and visited them regularly for other things. People in nursing homes often have nobody to see them. They see their family very seldom. I know this because when the last 5 or 6 years of my mother's life, she was in a nursing home. She could no longer be with me. She'd broken both of her legs. She couldn't walk anymore. And they wouldn't let her come home. So she stayed in the nursing home, and I went every day at lunchtime to feed her, to make sure that she ate, because she wouldn't eat for anybody but me. And I saw how the other people in the nursing homes had nobody. And people from our parish would get together. We had the ladies coming in to say the rosary, and they would come in, they would talk to the activities director and get kids from the school to come in and maybe have a birthday party once a month for all the people whose birthday was that month, or a Christmas party, or a Valentine's Day party, or whatever. And I tell you, you have babies, take them with you when you go to the nursing home. The elderly in the nursing home are crazy about babies. I remember one time we went to sing Christmas carols at this Franciscan sister's retirement home. And one of the mothers brought her baby with her. I know my mother, if there was a baby in the room, my mother would go crazy. Had to have the baby, had to touch the baby, had to see the baby. But we took a bunch of girls to the sisters' convent, and there's all these elderly nuns, and the girls are singing Christmas carols. The sisters were not paying a bit of attention. One of the mothers had a baby, and they were passing the baby around. I want to see the baby. No, it was my turn. Next, they wanted to touch the baby, to see the baby. So if you go visit a nursing home, take the little kids with you. You do a great deal of good there. As far as burying the dead, there are Catholic confraternities that raise money to help pay for burying the dead, because there are a lot of people who can't afford it anymore. My mother's buried here we have a Catholic cemetery on our property. The sisters are buried there. My mother's also buried there. And I had to have her body shipped out from New York to have her buried there. And that's cost a considerable amount of money. Someone came to me and offered, me a donation to help pay for it. She was a friend of my mother's. She had taken care of my mother for a few years when my mother was, after my mother's hips had been operated on, and she needed somebody to, take care of her. She lived with their family. And they gave me a donation of money to help pay for her burial. So it amazed me how expensive burying a person was. It's not just digging a hole in the ground and, a wooden box. No, a wooden box now costs a few $1,000s. It's ridiculous. But there are Catholic confraternities that's their job. They raise money to help pay for the funerals of people who cannot afford them. Somebody in your parish who dies, you might, contribute toward their funeral expenses. Yes?
Don't we, if we can, have an obligation to not stick our folks in a home, but to care for them if we can?
You can, because again, by the fourth commandment, you have but sometimes you can't care for them at home, in which case, yes, you
Because I've known some folks in our family who just,
Yeah, if
fully
you're-
capable of having their mother live with them,
I know,
and they just push them out.
I know. And
I think that's
wait
wrong.
till
Personally,
till they're older and see how their children treat them.
yeah, they'll get the
Because
same
the fourth commandment is one of the commandments, I wouldn't say one of the commandments,
that
it's the commandment that you get back in this life. You
Isn't that
get
honor
it
thy
back
father
in this
and thy
life.
mother?
Uh-huh.
That's why I come to this church.
Yeah, you
That
get it back
commandment
here.
alone.
How you treat your parents is the way your children will treat you. Remember that you're giving them an example.
Mm.
That's the way they're going to treat you, unfortunately. So there's many ways that you can help your neighbor. I mean, you don't have to fulfill every single one of these, you don't have to go out and bury your neighbor, but there's plenty of opportunities around you. You have a next door neighbor down the street who's elderly and can't mow her lawn. First of all, go visit her. She's probably lonely too. But if she can't mow her lawn, you can mow her lawn. You can do her dishes. Go in and, help her out a bit. Look around. You'll find plenty of opportunities to help people. But start in your own family. It's no use mowing the lawn of the neighbor down the street while yours is 3 feet high because you don't want to mow your own lawn. And it's your chore. You're supposed to be doing it. Do your duty first, then look around your own family and see what you can do. Look around your parish, see what's, your dad comes for a Saturday work day. Maybe you can come along with him and help out. See what else can be done in the parish. Who cleans the church? Who does the linens? Do they need help? Do you have any kind of talent that you can apply in that way? Oh. This is your obligation. This is the positive side of the 7th and the 10th commandment. Loving your neighbor, helping your neighbor when you can. But remember, there is a hierarchy. You need to start with your family and work outwards. Okay, so did I answer all your questions? All right, any other questions? Yes.
If tomorrow morning I went to my employer and stole $5,000 and took it down the street and gave it to a homeless man, then I have committed a murder.
Well, you'd be guilty of mortal sin. And then you'd have to make restitution. I don't know whether you're going to get the $5,000 back from the family or not. And you're also, in a way, making them complicit in your crime. That's not loving your neighbor.
So Robin Hood was not so good.
Robin Hood is no. No. Unfortunately, again, it's a very, the whole Robin Hood idea is very, some romance involved, sort of romantic idea involved in it. Robbing from the rich and giving to the poor, helping
It's
the
like
poor.
socialism.
Exactly, it is, and that's the whole idea behind socialism.
Yes, it
Take from those who have and give it to those who have not. Our Lord said, the poor you will always have with you. If you were to take all the money in the world, collect it together, and divide it up evenly among all the people in the world, within 15 minutes, one person would be richer than the next person.
And in 10 years, if you've got the same
Because
people
there are
before,
people saying,
same
oh,
people
I
after.
got some money, you got some money, okay, I like your sweater, how about, you know, you keep, you know, and there are people who can make money fast out of next to nothing. And so within 15 minutes, somebody is going to be a whole lot richer than, and somebody's going to be broke within 15 minutes. It's the way of life.
And it's got to be wrong to take that opportunity for somebody to leave a level.
Exactly. The whole problem with socialism, no, I wouldn't say the whole problem, but one of the major problems with it is it does away with the corporal works of mercy. The Catholic Church used to be the ones who took care of the hospitals, the orphans, the sick, the elderly. Now, social government is doing that, and are doing a very poor job of it.
Amen.
Where the Catholic institutions did a very good job of it, and for a whole lot less money. Zilch, you know, they took you for nothing, and they took care of you. You know, the sisters that Father talked about over there taking care of the elderly in India, I'm sure they're not charging them a penny. But the government charges you know, whatever Social Security you get, the government, you know, if you're in a nursing home, the government pays the nursing home your Social Security, and they take that to pay for your stay there. And then they supplement it with, you know, other things. But it's not, it's again, visit the nursing homes and see how they are taken care of. It's not great. All the more reason why they should. If you're visiting the nursing home, your relatives will be better taken care of than the ones who are not being visited. I guarantee that. They knew I was going to be there every day.
That's right.
And they made sure that my mother was always clean, was always dressed, was always in the chair, was always ready.
And it's shame
But there
for
were
them to
other
come.
people in other rooms I know who were lying in their own filth. This is nursing homes. It was not a Catholic nursing home. Nowadays, you have to get on a list to even get into a nursing
You
home,
know, based on profit. not
based
moral
on
justice.
availability too.
Yeah, sure.
What, you know. But anyway, it was, a lot of these Catholic institutions now are under the government telling them how because the government makes the rules and regulations now, how they are to work.
Yeah, how you're supposed to spend your money
Our
on
Lady of the
abortion.
Lake Hospital has the name of being a Catholic institution. When I was here 30 years ago, there were only 3 Franciscans there. Maybe
Talking about
more.
Our Lady of the Lake?
Yeah. There may be more there. But they didn't run the hospital. The sisters worked in the hospital. You know, they visited people. The hospital was run by a board of doctors, and I'm sure it still is. It's Catholic in name only. It's the hospital is run like any other hospital. It's not exactly the same as maybe Huey Long Hospital, which is a state hospital, has more money coming in from the government, and so probably the conditions are better at Lady of the Lake, but you have to pay for them. If you're poor, you end up going to one of the other hospitals. Yes, the government is paying, but you're getting that. The government, this is what you're going to see everywhere under socialism, and that's what we're moving towards. And everybody thinks, especially these stupid college kids, everybody thinks that this is going to be, they're going to all have jobs, and they're all going to have money, and they're all going to have houses, and they're all going to live like, they don't realize what life under the government is going to be like. Just really look into life under socialism. See what life is like in Russia and in China. That's what you're headed for.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you're, fine, you have a farm, do you know, they took when Russia fell under communism, there were people who had farms, large family farms, and they couldn't just come in and take their farms away from them. So what they did was they taxed their farms away from them. They had to meet a certain quota of produce or production every year. And if they didn't meet that, they had to give the government something in return for it, what was missing. So they end up slowly giving away their property till the government owned it all. That doesn't mean that there aren't rich people in Russia. All your bureaucrats are rich. Look at our own government. All the senators and all the congressmen are very rich and very powerful, and they will continue to be that way and become more so. Even under socialism, where all the people are so-called equal with them, it doesn't happen that way. There are equals, and then there are more equals. So, history, we study history to learn from its mistakes. I know kids in school always say, why do we have to learn this stuff? You study history to learn from its mistakes. And what we've learned from history is that we don't learn from our mistakes. We do it over and over and over again.
Right back to it, right.
So look at history. Look at just the last 50 or 100 years worth of history. And see, that's where we're going. And we're going because we didn't learn. We didn't learn.
And what's worse is the history they're teaching now,
Yes.
and moral history.
All right, so,
One more question.
sure.
So, I often have a dilemma when you see people on the side of the road with their signs.
Yes.
What is charitable and what is not charitable in that situation?
Well, I've had people come around to the house and ask me for donations for money or whatever, or standing outside a grocery store. I would rather give them food than give them money. That's the first thing because first of all, a lot of these people, they're not going to spend the money for food or shelter. They're going to spend the money for cigarettes,
Alcohol.
or drugs, or alcohol. So are you really helping them in that case? No. I would rather give the money to the soup kitchen or the place where they go, there's places where they can sleep overnight, to one of those halfway houses or whatever. I would rather give the money to them. If they ask me, I will give them food. I'll give you a blanket. But I won't give you money. I'll just tell you, first of all, I don't have money to give. They're in the convent, you have a vow of poverty. I can't even give you the blanket without permission from my superior. I certainly couldn't give you money. But you come to my house, I'll feed you. I remember as kids, there were tramps, back then. I don't know what they are now. They would come to the door, and Mom would feed them, and yeah, they don't do that anymore. Now they stand on street corners and they raise money and they go over to Burger King and buy. I would go to Burger King and buy them the hamburger and give it to them. I have done that. I've done that. Here's a hamburger, At least I know you'll eat this, you won't be hungry. You'll use the
Or they'll
money.
throw it on the ground in front of you and flick you the bird.
We have gift cards
Because you
now,
didn't
so
give them alcohol.
they have gift cards now, so you can buy a $5 gift card.
That's not a bad idea.
I think they would sell the gift card.
True.
Yeah.
I think they would sell anything that can be sold, they will. I know people who came around to my house, I would give them something, and I know they went around the corner and sold it.
Well, I would like
Because
to-
they were very specific as to what they wanted, because what they wanted was stuff that they could sell. Yeah, in some place, it can be a con job. That's why it's better to give your money to an institution rather than to the individual. So, that's the
You
person.
can always ask their name and tell them that you're giving them your prayers.
Yes,
And,
I-
and not only will your prayers help, but they're knowing that you are praying for them.
right.
You have
I don't ask them their name, but if they ask me for money, I just say, I don't have anything, but I'll pray for you. That's enough. And that's the best,
That's
you know,
usually
that's the best
true.
you can do.
I don't care cash.